Measure out the amount of fabric needed for the length of the muslin to be made. Snip and tear. So that you do not lose track of which is the length and the width grain, take a pencil and on the inside of the selvage draw arrows parallel to the selvage. Then tear the selvages off. Tearing will allow the fabric to stay on perfect grain. Now I have the correct length, but now I need the correct width. So measure the size of the garment to be made across the width, plus a few extra inches. That would be a hip length or the widest part of the body, plus about 4 or 5 inches. Snip and tear. To flatten the edges and pre-shrink the fabric with a good steam iron, steam everything nice and flat. The corners seem to be pretty perpendicular to each other, but just to be sure, let's fold it and check. Yep, the corners are straight and meet. So fold in half lengthwise and press the crease. This will be the center front crease. First I press it flat, then open it up, press again. You'll still see the crease, but it won't be quite as much of a bump in the fabric. Put this aside, and with what is left of that piece of muslin, measure off what you need for one of the back pieces. I already have the length, so now I have to measure for the width. So it's half of the back of the body plus about 3 or 4 inches for seam allowance and allowance for draping. Again, we're going to check to see if the corners are fairly perpendicular. Pretty good. Steam and press flat. We need one more piece of muslin to make the second half of the back piece. Tear the selvage off. Press and pre-shrink with the steam iron. And now bring one end to the other end, folding in half, and check to see if the corners all meet. On this one, I see that the right side, the corner's short, which means the fabric is a little off grain. So you want to take the short edge and its diagonal opposite and pull in that direction. Put the corners back together and it should be straight again. Yep, perfectly good. Now I steam it again to help block. Take the first piece, the front piece, and open it up. With a red pencil and my ruler, I'm going to draw straight down that crease line to determine a center front line. Now I have the measurements from the top of her shoulder next to her neck down to the bust line. I'm going to take that measurement, which was about 10, add an extra inch for seam allowance at the shoulder, and mark the bust down to the waist and then a hip. Starting at the bottom, I'm going to make that hip line straight across the entire piece of muslin, from the bottom of the muslin up to the hip line with pencil perpendicular, perfectly perpendicular to the center front line. Next to the waist, and finally the bust line. Here I'm going to put the model's name and label bust line, waistline, and hip line. To allow for a neckline, I'm going to come down the center front line about 4.5 inches. This will leave me about an inch at the top for the shoulder seam. I'm also going to mark 2.5 inches on either side of the center front line and draw, freehanded, a curve. I'm going inside the line slightly. This allows for extra seam allowance if I need it. We won't really know the model's shape of her neck until we drape this, but this gives me a basic shape. I cut it out with it folded so it's the same on both sides and clip 3/8 to 1/2 inch to allow it to bend under when I fit it to the model. Taking the two back pieces, I'm going to stack them carefully, aligning all the edges, and smooth it out. Down one edge, I'm going to draw a line in red pencil 1 inch from the edge of the fabric. This will give me a 1 inch seam allowance down the center back to work with. I'm labeling it center back, CB, and putting an arrow exactly to that line so there's no confusion. Turn the 2 pieces of fabric over and repeat the process on the other one, and if either piece is longer than the other, just cut it off. Here we go with the center back line down the opposite side of the back. Label center back right on the line and put an arrow. Check lengths just to make sure they're the same. Trim off any excess. Transfer the bust, waist, and hip lines to both back pieces. Label bust, waist, and hip. Now what I'm doing is aligning the center front and center back lines, remembering that the center back line is 1 inch inside the edge of the fabric. The back neck is shallower, so I'm going to set the front piece higher by about 1.5 inches, marking the shoulder area and then drawing a line, cutting it, and clipping. We'll refine this when we fit the model. To transfer the bust, waist, and hip lines from one side of the back to the other, simply take pins and along each line, put a couple of pins straight through, and then flip it over. Take your ruler, align the 2 pins, and draw between them and around them. This is a very simple way to transfer the straight lines. Now we have the 2 back pieces. You can see the 2 center back lines and the neckline between. And you can see the front piece with its deeper neckline. Now we have the muslin pieces ready to fit the torso sloper.